So we are M.E.M.S. I'm Mark. This is Chip. I'm from Buffalo. He's from Detroit. So we're going to go over a little bit of history for Buchla and for ourselves. So we kind of like to mix the two together. It's very much like gonzo journalism, like we place ourselves right in the mix. So initially, back in the 60s, many of you might have heard of the San Francisco Tape Music Center. Mort Subotnick and Ramon Sender started the center to democratize the creation of tape music. Now, of course, back then, they would cut up tape and splice it to create new sounds. So here's the original studio before Don Buchla the studio. And what they would do is they would actually record sine waves to tape and then speed up or slow it down to create sequences of musical pitches. So this is very cumbersome, of course. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. You have to be really good at splicing, obviously. Eventually they met Don, and Don had some ideas to create a better experience for splicing tape. And that's what created the sequencer. The 1, 2, 3 sequencer was his method of taking voltages and splitting them up, creating musical patterns with voltage. This is the modular electronic music system, which is where we get our name from. Since the initial rendition of the Buchla was called the M.E.M.S system, Buchla did not want to create a business. He didn't want to sell any modules. He just wanted to create modules for the center at this time. Eventually, so that's why the original modules say San Francisco Tape Music Center, because they were made specifically for the center. There's M.E.M.S. That's the first schematic where we saw that, and that's where we came up with the idea to go with that name. And this is Don with what we call Prototype 0. This is the M.E.M.S system. We had the luck to see this last year. I'm not sure of the fate of the M.E.M.S system, but hopefully it's going to go, in the right hands. As M.E.M.S is no more, it's Northeastern.
We did get to take it apart.
Yeah, took it all apart. Got to look at it.
Close to person.
I like to look at that face that Don's making, and whenever we try to make something and it doesn't work, that's the face I see in my head. This is right before Chip and I met. Chip was helping out at University of Michigan, taking apart a CBS Buchla, repairing it. The guy he's standing next to him, to his right, that's Lon from Hunting Lodge. He was actually helping them take pictures, helping Chip take pictures of the models.
Old school industrial band, the 80s.
And Chip's Chip is a machinist by he does a lot of stuff with machining, with metalwork and everything like that. So he's very good at measurements.
I'll get my caliper. Don't mess with me.
So it was at this time that Mike Peake had found out that I was working on Buchla clones of my own. I was just learning CAD software. I'm self-taught. We're both self-taught. We had no idea where to go with electronics before we started this whole project. So what we started to do is systematically recreate the modules from the ground up. The original CBS from University of Michigan, and then we started making panels and circuit boards that would match the feel of the original modules. Now, of course, a lot of things, I came out of making guitar pedals. That was like the first place into electronics that I got my feet wet. So a lot of the thing was mojo. A lot of the traces on the circuit boards, like the thickness, the shapes of the traces, they added their capacitances to the circuit. So I didn't want to do what everybody else does and put parts on a module and just auto-route it or just route it as easy as possible. We wanted to make it as if you had just walked into that university and played that module. That was a big step for us. So on the left, this is an original CBS 111, dual random source, and then this is our replication on the right. We had to make some changes as parts became unavailable, like these wire-wound pots on the left. Those are terrible trimmers. They end up seizing up or falling apart.
Rusting.
Yeah, rusting, so we went with a more modern trimmer. But we were still able to keep the same layouts as the scene. As we started doing this, we started to reach out to more colleges. We figured, at University of Michigan, great. Well, who else has a Buchla? Well, one of the biggest wins for us was being able to go to Wesleyan University, where they have the David Tudor mixer. Now, this is a pentaphonic mixer. So in each quadrant here, you have a speaker. And in the center, you also have a speaker as well. Now, the center speaker is David Tudor had asked for it to be down firing to make a prism of sound over. This is before he started getting into projects like the Pepsi Pavilion, where he had like 58 speakers in the dome. He really just wanted a way to use touch control to control the spatial sound. Could be considered one of the first quadraphonic mixers, 1965. This is David Tudor with the M.E.M.S Buchla, one of my favorite pictures of David Tudor. Fun fact, David Tudor hated the Buchla. I find this very interesting to think about, that in 1965, David Tudor sees the Buchla and goes, "This machine isn't forward-thinking enough." Now, if I had walked up to this, I probably would have thought it was like a panel from a spaceship, but David Tudor was already like on another planet at this point, so it wasn't good enough for him. Now, the 113 at Wesleyan University is all point-to-point. We opened it up, and there are no circuit boards.
You're very sad. We opened it up.
So our 1 hour reverse engineering turned into 12 hours of just drawing.
Look at those switches, figuring out those rotary switches.
Oh, yeah.
My goodness.
This is me, of course, looking at the module, and then we had sheets of paper, 11 by 14 sheets, and we just redrew the entire circuit out. It took us about 12 hours. And we had to look at every wafer on the pot, on the switches, and see exactly where all the resistors went. We had no schematics for this. It was just running blind. And Wesleyan University is source of one of my favorite endorsements from any college, which is Ron Buchla. That effing thing better be here when I come in tomorrow morning.
Because he left us alone with that priceless Buchla mixer. That was the last thing he said to us when he left. Like, "That stay as long as you want." Then I fucking leave in the morning.
Now, as we got into the 100 series, we burned ourselves out on variations. Now, this is the 158 dual sine saw oscillator. Very famous, Mort Subotnick used on Silver Apples of the Moon. There are 6 variations of the 158, all with different oscillator cores. So when you're listening to an old Buchla recording, you really don't know what you're hearing. The one that you want to look for from Silver Apples of the Moon is this one, 158 San Francisco Tape Music Center. That's the second version of it. Don's first version in the M.E.M.S system was just totally haywire. There's no trimmers, you can't tune it with a trimmer. You have to basically audition resistors. That's why.
The other thing I have to say is after you've stared at it as much as we have, can you see the weird faces and stuff in it? I see like the weird, like the alien guy standing like this. It's like we've stared at it a lot.
The one that you hear the most is the CBS 1588. That's the one you hear on a lot of recordings. It's at that point CBS has reached, of course, when Buchla sold to CBS, more artists were using the system. Now, Don eventually got sick and tired of making modules during the CBS phase, so a lot of universities couldn't buy them from him. Columbia University started cloning their own modules, and I find this interesting because this happened in the 80s. People wanted to order modules from Don, and they're like, "No way." He's like, "No way, you just stop answering the calls." So Columbia University had a team of students actually reverse engineer, and there's a picture of this system, and I originally thought it was just prototypes from Buchla. Absolutely not. It's all student made. And it's just absolutely haywire. It's just they took out a Xerox of the back of the board, and they basically made a quad 291 filter by sticking them together like that. It's my favorite picture of Don at the 200. This system here is at Stony Brook, Long Island, and one of the biggest Buchla cabinets. These cabinets are the worst cabinets to take modules out of.
Particularly.
Yeah. Don had placed the modules in the back and had them supported by a bar, so when you unscrew the back, all the modules just fall out in your lap. And he did this so people couldn't go in and take a module out and just steal it.
So you have to flip the whole thing on its face, so to speak, and put the modules in. Otherwise, you're feeling the old modules trying to get them done.
Yeah.
And trying to tighten up. That's ridiculous.
Another school we went to University of Illinois. They actually have a pretty big Buchla there, which was surprising to us. A lot of the modules have been removed from it, and there's a surge quad panel, which is extremely rare, up at the top. It's terribly built. But
I've got telephone wires, all the wires is in the spike of my like telephone, solid core wire.
it's a close-up of the University of Illinois system with our favorite keyboard, the 217. This is Oberlin Conservatory. This is the reason we came here. That's the 212 dodeca module. One of the very few that are floating around in the world. That was part of the System 101, which had an actual keyboard, surprisingly. As the 200 series, yeah. As the 200 series modules started coming in, we started getting more and more photos of 200 series modules. It got a lot harder. I don't really know anything about CAD software, but I had to learn real quick. So basically, I was making my own packages with asymmetrical pads. So some of the pads are on the bottom only, some are on the top and the bottom, just so we could fit all the traces. And these are all hand drawn.
What's that?
So 5 pins connected.
Yikes.
These are all hand drawn and then put into software. So we order boards. Really beautiful stuff. Another hard module, the 242. You'll be able to see this at our table. But basically, you have a matrix mixer. Now, Electro was making the same company that made it for the first run of VCS 3s. Impossible to get. These were custom made for Buchla. So we made our own.
Did you guys see the clown face? Go back. See the clown face, the eyes, the nose.
And then the red fluffy hair.
Clown head.
So what we did was we made a stack up of 3 boards for the matrix. Yeah.
That's what I get.
Board interconnects. So they all impressive.
Try soldering it together.
Yeah, you have to customize the
done.
soldering iron to make it.
Woo!
And that's the module.
Or a sandwich.
And the MARF. This is E.M.S's MARF. Right now it's in my possession. Board 2, which is the digital board, this is the digital logic, is completely corroded. So something corrosive or liquid got on it, wore out all the traces,
Can't
all the vias. But so what we're doing, and one of the benefits of us doing this is that universities have replacements. So what we've been able to do is make a complete new board set of these, and we can swap out their board too. So if they get a working MARF, then they can take the original and place it in their archives, whatever they want to do.
One in the trash jar, so I can say. It's terrible.
When you look at this stuff in person, it's very underwhelming. You think about how much it costs, what the value of the modules are, and you're just like, if I got this and paid this much for it, I would be so depressed. But it's kind of haywire the way everything's all point-to-point wired. One of the nicest things about these boards is this was Don's prototype, so all of his handwriting's on it in pencil. This is a weird one. This is the 223 CV locator. This exists in Philadelphia, but on the left is a picture of Don performing with David Rosenboom. He's performing a piece called In Collaboration. And the 223 was designed to work specifically with the systems interface, the quad panel. What this would allow you to do is start the sound in any quadrant you want, instead of having it just start in one quadrant, as the 227 would do. So you can actually have inverse motions on different channels of the 227. Not sure why he didn't make more of these, because it's a great idea. Now, I'll try to keep this short, because there's a whole entire lecture I could have on the easel. Programming and metaprogramming in the electro-organism. Many of you might have seen that book, the manual for the easel, written by Alan Strange. Now, Don, when he was designing the easel, had a bunch of hurdles to go over in terms of portability. He wanted a machine that was portable enough that anyone could carry it around. Something that was easy to use, well laid out. But a lot of people don't realize his vision at this point. Don was always looking to connect the user to the instrument in very strange ways, like touch control. Interesting to note that the touch plates were actually designed as rocket fuel sensors for NASA. He had actually taken that idea and used it for the keyboards. But it goes far beyond just the touch into more meta experiences with the instruments. What a lot of people don't realize about the title, Programming and Metaprogramming, is that around the same time the easel came out, there was a book by John C. Lilly, which he has a whole nother lecture all by himself, called Programming and Metaprogramming and the Human Biocomputer. Now, it's an amazing book. So, what the book is very heady in terms of everything that he goes over in the book. But there's one takeaway that I think Don was reading when he made the easel. So Billy came up with an idea called zoinetics, using reverse bionics. So the bottom paragraph here is that zoinetics is developed around the axiom that whatever humans create inevitably inherit, reflect in some ways their brain's design. It is therefore hypothesized that we can understand, decode, and or predict constrained structures, principles, or reveal patterns of design, biological matter, in the human brain by reverse bionicking objects around us that were constructed by humans. So I believe that Don's idea for the easel was to create a device that would actually program the program. Your experience with the unit as a whole would actually influence your adjustment to the system. David Rosenboom would always talk about how humans are often seen as an input or as an output-only device, where we would just output and output and output. But we should really be seen as a feedback, constantly taking in inputs and releasing outputs at the same time. There's a poem by Don Buchla and Charles McDermott that's very important to this. And basically, the operator functions in a special relationship to his own perceptual feedback system, a system in which the machine functions as a critical interface within the circular circuit. Now, the circular circuit has been seen as the input-output loop of the performer. This poem is actually very interesting. It's available, I think Todd Barton shared a PDF of this somewhere on Wiggler. Definitely worth looking it up. It's by Charles McDermott. But it's pages and pages long. It's written almost in cut-up style where it's very complex. And this is just one more step further, of course, into connecting the composer to the instrument. This is David Rosenboom performing On Being Invisible with a Buchla 300. And what he's doing is he is listening to the system and controlling the system with brain waves simultaneously. So his idea for On Being Invisible was basically that you're listening to the performer compose in real time. The piece has no real structure to it. It has no real, there's no sheet music for it other than having certain events going on, maybe 3 different musical phrases, and you listen to each of those phrases, and then your brainwaves will actually adjust other parameters of the synthesizer as you were listening. Very impressive. He has a very good article that he wrote. It's called Biofeedback in the Arts. It's still available through Frog Peak. Definitely worth picking up. Dave Rosenboom definitely took the Buchla to like the next level. And this here, not very many people have seen this. This is the EEG edition. And this module was actually designed to take your brainwaves and output 3 different brainwave patterns, alpha, theta, and beta brainwaves. And what you could do, so each brainwave had a different function. Alpha, of course, is like a more focused, meditative state. That goes in line in the 60s, where they were really championing the idea of the artist doing nothing. Really see this happen in a lot of brainwave pieces. Melvin Musier's Music for Solo Performer, where he just basically amplifies a bunch of resonated objects, and if you look at him, he's just a stoic sitting there, appearing to do nothing. It's a very powerful image. And that was the model that was designed for them. We were able to find the sheet that had the labels for this. This exists also at M.E.M.S at Philadelphia. This was actually donated to them by David Keene. And there's a lot more we could probably talk about, but I think that pretty much wraps up where we want to. Any questions?
Yeah, how quick question. So you take all the products you have, you clone them, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We wanted to
You
make sure.
re-engineer them.
The way you clone them, that's, to be honest,
Yeah, I would
Right.
say, yeah.
Well,
So it's really it really boils down to having these modules like warts and all. I want, like when we made the 132 waveform synthesizer, we were talking to Ron at Wesley, and he goes, well, you could improve the shelf of these partials by, and he started writing all these schematics on the board. Filters up, and Chip goes, you're wasting your breath, because Mark will never change the circuit. And we wouldn't. Like, we would want that module to operate exactly as if you'd walked into M.E.M.S and used their system. Even if there's certain quirks or things that it doesn't do 100% correctly, we want the end user to experience
The only
that.
time we change something when it's like the part's not available
Yeah.
anymore. Like for instance, there's a couple filters that have such old op amps that the pinout's different. We can't use it because it was so early that it wasn't standardized. So we left it. If you ever find UA 749s, we could put it in there. We make replacement ICs, we call them. And that's got an op amp on it. Just all the pins are out.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything else is exactly like the original, just like a time machine.
There's some things too that we changed that are just design flaws. When Don was doing stuff with Logic, he would do all sorts of weird stuff that wasn't necessarily correct with voltages.
And smash.
He would take Logic gates and just smash them together to make new like Don Logic.
So then we have a guy that helps us a lot, Dave Brown, modular synthesis, and he's like he was worked for Tektronix and some of the stuff just won't fly with him. He said, "You can't do that. You can't smash this to get into that," and this. He's running at the wrong voltage. You guys got to change it to 5 volts. It's being run at 12 volts. And like,
Yeah, there's a lot
I
of stuff.
guess we got to change the burn out the ICs.
And Don had a huge problem with Motorola because he said that they lied on their quote unquote lied on their data sheets. But it was really just Don like just blasting these things with like the highest voltage he could. Like
Motorola data sheets, early ones are terrible.
yeah, they're awful.
They're hard to understand.
Yeah. They're just they don't really show like direct pinouts. They show like one picture of it, and they have a chart like this where you sift through all the data.
Are you guys doing like audio comparisons? I would imagine when you recreate the circuit and
Yeah.
you use modern components, you're getting like a much cleaner sound.
So, for instance, we built the 232, which is like a FreeHD voltage, and I had on my bench in Detroit. I had the original,
Yeah.
the original, and built our copy of it, and then sent it to Dave Brown, and ours operated better than the original. And they figured it's because of the backers. But yeah, we compared it, and ours actually worked a little nicer than the original. So yeah, we do compare.
Yeah, I think there's like kind of an analogy between like video game recreations where it's like you can emulate the thing, but people want like a weird glitch or like a weird audio
Yeah.
because the board
Yeah,
is garbage or something is rusted up. You know, it's weird. Like what?
Or for instance,
The
there's
chip part.
Yeah, or old chip parts, sure.
I mean,
Old
yeah, chip
ICs,
parts
so
old. You know, replace that, and then a lot of people died. We got to do the emulation for that sound here.
yeah, it's
Right.
it's a tough task because it's not like an acoustic instrument where
So, for instance, we did the 148 harmonic generator that does the fundamental of that, 10 partials, which is makes it one time faster again and again and again. But the way Don did it was really weird. Is he turned saw like in the triangle and there's a crossover point, so it has like a glitch. It's really hard to get. So you hear the fast. And you could hear an artifact. And it would be really nice to change that oscillator and make it like a triangle chord.
Yeah.
okay.
But we can't. It's like, and they was, you guys should really change this. You can totally, he's like, so you can put this, the 158 blah 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 in there and it works better. And I'm like, yeah.
It's hard to say too where Don's head was on that because a lot of his explanations of like the waveforms were like, oh, it's interesting sounding. Where I think a lot of it was a knowledge-based thing, where Don was just kind of like grasping at certain straws to make certain things work. You hear there's a lot on the internet about the acoustic instrument, Don wanting to emulate an acoustic instrument. And Morton Sabatnik has an
Oh, God.
That was a cool.